Hello and welcome back to the Endless Report. This is episode 6. We are coming to you live. I'm here in Miami, Florida, and Brian is back in New Jersey, where we're both from. How's it going, Brian?
Good here in rainy New Jersey today, but I think the thunderstorms have all gone through, so we're not
Yeah,
at too much risk for losing power here at this point.
sounds good. I think we've been getting the same thing. I mean, I've been having storms every day. The past like 2 weeks straight, it's been raining nonstop. I don't know about in New Jersey, but now we're back to like the 500-degree weather where it's just back to the
Excellent,
heat. Seems like all the rain's kind of gone through, so that's a good thing.
excellent. Hey, Miami is the new Silicon Valley, so it's
Exactly.
all good.
Yeah. So I
Cool.
guess we'll just get it started right off here. We're gonna get into the Activision Blizzard lawsuit, which we've talked a lot about on the show in the past few weeks. So let's see if I can pull that
Yeah,
up
I
here
imagine
for
we'll be
us.
talking about it for years to come,
Yeah,
also.
because it
So
seems like
might
definitely
as
a
well
lot
keep
to
it
talk
going.
about for sure. So I'm gonna pull
Yeah,
that
well,
up here for us.
but there were some developments this week. So the most interesting one, and we'll talk about it, which I honestly, Anthony, didn't even know about the uh, preliminary part to this. So I think as we've talked about on the program in the past, and we don't have to get into this. Started a month or two ago when the state of California filed suit against Activision Blizzard over their employment practices, sexual harassment by employees, generally bad treatment of women, and insufficient attention and concern being paid to employees who tried to bring that to Activision Blizzard's attention. There were walkouts by the Activision Blizzard employees. There were some inadequate PR responses by folks at Activision Blizzard, several of whom are no longer with Activision Blizzard. And apparently, and this is the part I wasn't tracking, apparently, Anthony, and I didn't know this, in the course of all of that, on September 27th, the filed by the United States Federal Equal Opportunity Employment Commission that is distinct from the state of California suit that was originally brought, which is an action being brought by the California Department of Employment and Housing, which is the California authority that has an analogous mission to the federal EEOC. In response to the federal suit, the news was revealed this week that Activision Blizzard created an $18 million compensation fund that is designed to settle that federal EEOC lawsuit. The goal of or the purpose of the funds in that suit were to make compensation and amends to eligible claimants, which are Activision Blizzard employees who may have been sexually harassed or had employment harassment related to their gender. The the structure of the fund as Activision Blizzard setting it up is, they're stating that basically eligible claimants must have worked at the company since September 1st, 2016, and individuals will receive an amount determined by the EEOC. Any cash from the $18 million fund that goes unclaimed will be donated to, quote, charities that advance women in the video game industry or promote awareness around harassment and gender equality issues. So, this is an agreement that will require court approval, but if approved, I assume, by a federal court, that will, again, settle this federal EEOC suit. It will not speak to the California suit. It will not speak to any action currently going on with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, who are also looking into Activision Blizzard and have put out a number of subpoenas around that, including a subpoena for Bobby Kotick, who's the CEO of Activision Blizzard. So, this is a step towards settling, some of this. So, I mean, I guess I'll start, Anthony. Again, you're someone looking to come into the games industry, someone who's a longtime gamer. Reaction to that. $18 million of funds being set aside by Activision Blizzard to support female employees who may have been wronged here. Your reaction to that as a step here, your reaction to that, amount as something that Activision Blizzard is doing.
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of what we talked in the past was a lot of more, word-based, how they're going to change, what they're going to do. So obviously, putting that money into it and saying this is exactly our plan, this is the money we're putting in, and we're making a substantial investment into this type of development sounds like a good thing on paper. Again, as someone who may doesn't really understand exactly what that means or exactly where all that money is going, per se, just from hearing that, I'm skeptical of what exactly that means, but again, putting that monetary amount means obviously there is this fund that's actually going into real progress and real change within the company. So I'm curious to see how that money's spent, I guess is my real answer. Where that money's going exactly, to what programs, to what hirings, to what positions. I guess that's what we have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think there's the devil is always in the details. Certainly for Activision Blizzard, I think as a move, it makes sense. Again, assuming it gets through the courts and the courts accept the settlement, because it can eliminate there, especially when it appears that this federal one is the not that the allegations aren't serious, but from threatening Activision Blizzard's bottom line perspective, it's probably the less serious one relative to the California one. So it gets that, for them not to worry about. There certainly was some negative backlash against it, in on Twitter and in the game industry press, I think, primarily around the amount. $18 million is not a ton of money, certainly relative to Activision Blizzard's market capitalization. This is a $60 billion, billion with a B, $billion company. And so $18 million is a rounding error for them as a company. Frankly, it's a rounding error on the budget on many of their major game franchises. So, I think folks could expect more out of it. And depending on how many, employees are in the class of having been damaged by this, and what you could actually do with that. I think you hit the nail on the head. That will it be impactful? Maybe. There's reason to believe that it won't be. Again, I think that the predominant sentiment I saw was savvy move by Activision Blizzard, kind of disappointing. And people skeptical that it will have any real impact, and a sentiment that Activision Blizzard may be getting off a little easy on this one.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And obviously, like you said, 18 million is a blip in the grand scheme of things. That's something I didn't really, I didn't really think about it in that sense where if again, like where is this going towards? Is this just a PR move to say, oh, we're throwing some, millions of dollars into, we're going to be better now. And that's it. Is it just kind of one of those statements? Is it a PR move? Is it them getting off without really making any real change and just saying they're making change? That's something I don't really know. And I'm wondering, where do we go from here? I feel like it falls on the buck of the people in charge, the new management, and what steps they're actually taking on a daily basis to better their employees, better the working environment, better this company. So I think that, again, like I said, that money, while people maybe scoffing at that or thinking that's too little, or thinking that maybe not even be a real change, I'd have to agree that I'm not sure we have any real evidence here to quantify this is actually a step in the right direction for Activision. But I don't want to play, just devil's advocate on every point and just say we don't know. Like I hope that this is a good opportunity for them. I hope there is change from this. But again, it does sound it on paper maybe a little hollow, or maybe in that vein. But that's not.
Well, yeah, I know it's a good point, and as you say, it remains to be seen, right? Mm-hmm. Certainly, no amount of money that you can throw around can undo what's happened in the past. And again, mm-hmm. Including in situations like this where there are allegations that people are dead now because of being victims of harassment and taking their own lives, and horrible mm-hmm. news like that. And certainly no amount of money can bring someone back. No amount of money can undo, the suffering that I think some folks have suffered here. And frankly, no amount of money can alter the culture going forward. So certainly if there are people who have been wronged and were victimized, some amount of compensation and restitution for that on the part of the company is appropriate, and they're deserving of it. No amount of money you're going to give to people for stuff that's already happened is going to change what happens going forward. And as we've talked about in the past, the only thing that's going to change that is a sincere cultural commitment to do something different going forward. That may require a leadership change. It may require a cultural shift. There have been leadership changes already that we've seen somewhat reluctantly entered into, and in other cases a little more proactively. And so that's good. But, and to what extent this is just savvy, corporate risk management in dealing with the past claims, and maybe there is a sincere commitment. We'll see. But that's how it'll play out. But it's moving forward. It's going to be real interesting to see how the California suit, which is I think the one that they potentially, that Activision Blizzard has more exposure about and was the one that started it all. It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. And as I joked, and I probably shouldn't make light of it, because I do think that's going to play out over a period of years, and we're going to be talking about it, and it's going to be affecting the industry and the climate in the industry for a period of years.
100%. And I have to agree 100% what you said. I think it's more of a cultural thing. I think we could, you could throw around money, you could throw around these articles about what you're doing, but again, it's going to happen within that company, within their management, within the way they deal with things. So I'm hopeful for the future. Obviously, you can't change the past, but moving forward, I'm hopeful that they could foster a more inclusive, more respectful environment, not only in that company but the industry at large. So again, good hopes for the future. But I have to agree 100%. We just have to wait and see there for sure. And I think it definitely is a cultural thing, more so than just financial issue.
We will see. We will see how it plays out. Well, so let's bounce around. We'll do some happier topics here. We'll try to intersperse them rather than, I feel like the last time we did this, it was a little bit of a parade of depression. So we'll try to do some happy topics too. So Nintendo had an event. Yes, Nintendo had an event this past week. They made some announcements. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So a lot of new game announcements. Scroll down here through the article. We saw a new Kirby game announcement. A lot of people were looking at this game going, is this The Last of Us? We saw a lot of post-apocalyptic looking environments, but it was a new Kirby game. Very exciting for a lot of people. If you're a Nintendo fan, they also announced a lot of new additions to Nintendo Switch Online. So they're now adding Nintendo 64 games, which is very interesting to me. They're also changing the way they monetize, and I think they're adding a few new smaller features, but I'm not sure if a lot of people pay for Nintendo Online. I know it's kind of, compared to PS Plus and Xbox Game Pass and Live, it's a little bit of its own ecosystem, but the Switch actually started out with, free online, and now it's become a paid service. But you get all these older games, and now they're adding Nintendo 64 titles to that library. You can see you get Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Star Fox 64, Super Mario 64. So
yeah, some Genesis titles as well.
Yeah, some Genesis titles as well. I'm seeing here Sonic 2, Golden Axe, Echo the Dolphin. So very interesting. And they're also selling new controllers, I saw also. I'm not sure if they have a picture in the article, but new Nintendo 64 and Genesis retro controllers that pair with Switch, which I thought was pretty interesting as well.
I feel like we talked about this on a prior, I forget what it was in reference to, but on a prior, report, we talked about how just Nintendo knows their audience and they know their market, and they're the family console. The reality is there are plenty of gamers, who grew up on the NES and the, SNES back when they were youngsters like myself, who are parents now. And it's the gaming machine that they have, and it's always been the case with Nintendo's consoles, and this nostalgia loop is just huge, right? So you go and you play an old Genesis title or an old Super Nintendo title or what have you, because it takes you back, or you go in and you introduce your kids to it while you both play the latest first party Nintendo releases on the current platform. It's such a loop, and they're really embracing it, here too, because I understand that they're also, with this release, they're planning on releasing retro controllers, Nintendo 64 and Genesis controllers for the Switch as well, which, they'll sell some of those. And again, it's a pure nostalgia.
Yeah. It just brings back they're trying to bring all that experience back. I love it. Oh yeah, go on, continue.
That's what that's what the world, as someone who is now squarely in the demographic of you're now a parent, and we're going to play on your nostalgia to get you to experience either these old things or these reboots of old things with your own kids, because that basically is, that and Star Wars and Marvel are what
Yeah.
family entertainment is now in 2021.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when I think of family entertainment, it's like Disney and Nintendo, and then there's not much else on the plate there. It really is very focused there. But I do think it is a good thing. I mean, obviously, I don't like the idea of the profiting off of like pulling nostalgia out when it's not necessary. But this seems like a really nice scenario here. I like this. I like the idea of the games are free if you're paying for Nintendo Switch service in general. But again, I believe the controllers are $50 each, so little steep. I'm sure they're wireless. They maybe have some modern tech in there, so that's still interesting as well. But I like the idea of at least having the access to these older titles, and I think we've talked about that in the past a lot with Game Pass and the whole idea of Xbox with the backwards compatibility. And I know that's been a problem with PlayStation a little bit, where they haven't had as much of a backwards compatibility push, but a lot of ports and a lot of things going on, especially Switch ports too. They've had a lot of ports from either Wii U or just from other consoles, Xbox, PlayStation, PC. So it's interesting to see, which of these consoles have access, especially when we talk about older games and preservation. We talk about, and so when we get into these nostalgia conversations, I always think about, how long are these games going to last? Are we always dependent on re-releases to get games from the past to be able to play again the same way we always did? And seeing these repackaged controllers and redoing the N64, it gives me hope.
Yeah, and it's easier to get excited about it when they're genuinely good games, also, which helps. So say Sonic 2, Echo the Dolphin. These are good games. These are really good titles. Super Mario 64, obviously. And then I also saw, Anthony, that if I read the update right here, that among the titles being released on Switch are Knights of the Old Republic, which is funny because we were talking about that last report with the PS5 reboot of that franchise, but this is the original Knights of the Old Republic from the early 2000s. That's going to be interesting too.
Which is probably the most exciting thing for me in the whole show. I mean, maybe I'm not the most diehard Nintendo fan, so I know there were a lot of Nintendo announcements. There was a Splatoon expansion. I know there was the new the Bayonetta 3 was finally announced, which I know a lot of people are fans of the Bayonetta series, which that was a long time coming to see that fully announced, so that was a big deal. But for me, KOTOR was just really exciting because I played it on the PC when I was younger, and it seemed like one of those things where if you don't have an Xbox and they have the backwards compatible version, I was kind of thinking, I'll wait for the remake. I've played it in the past. I'm gonna wait for the PlayStation remake because I play on PlayStation primarily. But now seeing that we have the original coming to Switch in this kind of accessible way, and I have a Switch, I'm thinking I'd rather just replay the original and get that experience again. And I think I'd recommend most people, don't go play the remake. I'd say play the original either on Xbox or Switch or PC, wherever you can get it. Now that it's becoming this available this year, I think it's just really exciting.
You're still going to get the remake.
100%. I'm going to get both. 100%, but I'm probably going to get both now. But it's funny, that's actually dropping November 11th, I believe, which is the same day they're re-releasing Skyrim again for the 10th anniversary. So it's kind of like
they re-release Skyrim every day, Anthony, so that doesn't really
every
mean
single day for the next 10 decades, apparently. But it's kind of funny. This fall we have like a Halo game coming out, Skyrim, KOTOR, Battlefield. Just a lot of franchises I feel like that were kind of from like when I was younger, just all coming out this fall, either in a re-release or some sort of reboot kind of title. I just think it's funny the way things turned out with COVID and everything and all these delays. But
so speaking of re-releases or releases of basically the same stuff, we had an Apple event a couple weeks ago. We have iPhone 13 news. Shall we talk about that a little bit?
Exactly. That's a great transition into the new iPhone. I was primarily very excited for the new iPhone event. Actually, I was thinking about making the switch. I'm an Android user personally. I had an iPhone in the past. I think my last primary iPhone was the iPhone 6s. So it's been a while for sure, but I was thinking maybe this is the year I switch back. And there were a few things I was hoping that would change. There are a few things they did change. There are a few main things that I felt they were missing. And I don't know if you want to jump into that, but there's
so I'll give you the rundown. So Apple announced the iPhone 13 lineup, similar to last year's announcement of the 12. You've got the iPhone 13, you've got the iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max. models, as well. It's in general, it seems to be more of an incremental improvement across the board. They're not announcing as stellar, performance numbers relative to the prior generation. They went with this 50% better than our competitors thing, as opposed to
the imaginary competition they compared it to.
The unspecified competition, as opposed to X% better than our own prior generation. Mm. From a some interesting camera features, particularly on the Pro devices, and maybe from a gaming news perspective, the most interesting piece of news is the Pro and Pro Max will feature 120 hertz displays, adaptive displays, so they can go up to 120 hertz refresh rate, but can scale down far below that. In fact, far below, I believe, even below 60 hertz, which is the default on the prior ones for low power applications.
A diagram that it scales from, I think, about 10 hertz all the way to 120 hertz, and it's adaptive while you're interacting and swiping, which I've not seen before. I'm interested to see how that feels, because apparently it gives you a new feel just interacting with the device, because it adapts to your finger speed or something. I was very interested by that.
It's a tricky thing, and it's relevant in game development as well, because there have been Android devices that will do 120 hertz. I think they will do more than 120 hertz, like gaming oriented Android phones for a while now. And if you don't, and Google made an investment in doing this as these 120 hertz phones started coming out. If you don't tweak your user interface to accommodate that and refine the timings on your animations and your transitions and stuff, to your point, you can actually end up making the whole thing feel more sluggish rather than less sluggish. So I haven't gotten my hands on one yet. I got a 12 last year, so I'm not looking to upgrade. But if Apple does that, it could make a really interesting experience. I saw a few reviews online of people who are playing games that have been adapted to support up to the 120 hertz refresh rate on their phones, and they're saying it's a pretty good experience. I mean, it's getting just beyond phones now. It's interesting how that feature, when you've been around as long as I have, I feel like I'm always talking about how old I am on these, but and you think about the different improvements that have happened over time in computing that really affect the user experience. The two that stand out for me more than anything else, one is when we switched to solid state drives, right? And we stop with mechanical hard drives, and just the improvement you got in boot up times and loading times across all those sorts of devices with solid state. And now when you have like super fast SSDs or NVMe SSDs and how amazing that is. That was one. And then the other is high refresh rate, gaming, which just definitely makes a difference. And it'll be cool to have that on a platform like a phone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more so we were talking more about the PlayStation 5 around its launch specifically. The two big things I think they were promoting was obviously the NVMe SSD, which was they were saying was faster than SSD before, like it's going to change the way we game. That was a huge exciting deal. And the other thing was 120 hertz and like the new HDMI standard, HDMI 2.1, to be able to have 4K 120, which was previously like undoable and on really any television other than the game monitor. But except for absurdly priced, high end, type of displays. But I think it's just interesting as, seeing all this new stuff in the iPhone. And I feel like they're missing out on certain things the iPhone should have had the past few years. So while I'm excited to see the 120 hertz screen, I mean, I have a OnePlus phone actually here. So this is a 90 hertz screen. So I've been used to having a slightly higher refresh rate. 90 hertz is kind of a weird area.
That's a weird number.
Yeah, I've never had a 90 hertz screen in any other device ever before. But I really love this phone. It's obviously faster than 60 hertz. It's very speedy. I like it as a thumbprint in the screen, so I can unlock it right from the screen. A lot of things like that, and I was excited to see.
What gets you to switch to an iPhone, or maybe I should ask what is holding you back?
I think the main thing is USB-C, and I thought it was kind of funny how they started the conference announcing the iPad Mini and new Apple Watch and they went through the whole iPad Mini conference, and they said how they're switching to USB-C and how it's 10 times faster than Lightning because it's on a USB 3.0 standard where Lightning is still on 2.0. It's literally 10 times faster. It has, faster charging. Every Android phone, every MacBook is on it. There's no HDMI ports, regular USB. It's only USB-C on all their MacBooks. So basically, every other device from Apple now that isn't the iPhone 13 or the other iPhones are running on USB-C. So it's kind of frustrating to me, like, why? How can you come out and advertise, this 10 times charging speed and fast charging, and then you come out and announce the iPhone 13 a few minutes later, and you just don't even show the bottom of the phone because you don't want to talk about it because you've never improved. I understand, to switch the Lightning port would be a big deal. I mean, people flipped out when they switched the 30-pin connector, and that was very outdated at the time. I was 100% on board with that switch, but when they last switched the iPhone charger, it was like the biggest controversy in the world for some people, I feel like. So I understand their hesitancy, but I enjoy having a thumbprint, Touch ID, which they also have on the iPad Mini now too. It's on the side of the phone on the power button, which is not available on the iPhone 13. It's still Face ID only. I do appreciate the smaller notch for Face ID. I'm not a fan of the notch at all. I like the idea of having a full screen.
You're not a notch guy.
Not at all. And I've been used to this. This phone actually has a full screen, no camera bump whatsoever. And the camera, it comes out of the top. So it actually comes out right here. And so there's when I'm not using it, there's no notch whatsoever. It's just a full display, which I much prefer. Maybe that's not a big deal to most people. I know you get used to it.
I got used to it. It was a little annoying at first, but I got used to it. And then, if you put it in, I have a 12 Pro, and when you put it in a case and it covers up the camera bump, it kind of works.
I think it looks really nice too. I mean, it's obviously a much more elegant phone than a lot of Androids. I love the glass and the metal design for sure. It's just little things like that, like USB-C. Maybe not the biggest deal, but it's a really big deal to me for some reason.
Yeah, the USB. I mean, we didn't have this on our news list today, but the other related news is that the European Commission is going to be mandating USB-C on all phones, and there's some speculation on whether Apple's going to attempt to respond or if they're going to comply with it. Because basically what folks are speculating there is the requirement is written in such a way that if your device doesn't support charging over its port, you aren't required to comply with the USB-C regulation. So there's some speculation as if the next iPhone, or at least the next European iPhone models, will be wireless charging only.
Yeah.
And that'll be their way, around that, which would be an interesting. I mean, I have a idiosyncratic take on this, which is, I think USB-C. I think in general the USB ecosystem, including USB-C, is a nightmare. And people don't like. So I'll give you a for instance, right? So, I'm doing some business travel overseas next week, and we're going to be meeting with some partners, and we wanted the ability to showcase some of our games. So we picked up a new thin and light gaming laptop to travel with, and it has a USB-C Thunderbolt 4 port on it, which is the latest Thunderbolt standard. That is allegedly compatible with every revision of USB-C up to USB 4. Is a USB-C physical connector, but also does all the Thunderbolt revision. And the thing is, it's impossible to know what cable you need, and often by looking at a cable that you might have in your nest of cables, what capabilities it has, right? So to the extent of I'd say I have two seemingly identical USB-C cables that allegedly are rated for power and data. But only one of these cables will actually carry a display signal out of that USB-C port, right? So it's a nightmare. And, whereas the Lightning cable just works.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
And, everything you said about it was true. It's USB, 2 based. It doesn't support the fastest charging, but, at the same time, it just works. And the USB-C, the Lightning cable that I got with my iPhone 5 or whatever it was that first had that connector so many years ago, just works. And I think a lot of people value that, and
100%.
I think that's
And
what
that's
Apple
Apple's whole
believes.
game,
Yeah.
And I guess I'm coming from the perspective of someone who's like, I don't, I'm the lazy USB-C user. I don't want to switch back. I'm used to my little comforts with it. But I agree where I brought the MacBook, how it's only 4 USB-C ports. That's it. And like, that's not convenient. It looks nice.
No,
it
it's
looks
not.
sweet, but it's a nightmare. Like, that's the opposite end of the Apple spectrum, where I feel like everybody's buying adapters and dongles and everything. And then this one only takes data. This one only this one only charges, which USB cable you're buying, so now you're in the whole realm of third-party dongles and adapters and cables, which is not really where Apple wants to be. I think they want you buying their $30 charging point, or that $30 lightning cable that just works.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't know what their strategy is, or if they have some thought process to why they're doing what they're doing at the moment, but I just think that nothing's perfect right now, I guess, is my answer.
People have different patterns of usage, and I may be idiosyncratic here. Because I don't think this is purely a case of Apple's trying to get you to buy a dock and
I don't think so either.
I don't think it's that. I think what it is I think probably, I assume correctly, Apple thinks most people use their laptops most of the time not plugged into anything, not plugged into power, not plugged into any peripherals, right? And so and they think most people would prefer a thinner, lighter laptop. And that's why they do that, and why they have laptops with only one kind of port now and a small number of them. The problem with that, at least in my experience or in my use case, is when you have a laptop with a limited selection of ports, again, both in type and quantity, you have to carry around dongles or docks or things like that. And it is, in my opinion, far less convenient to have your laptop bag full of various dongles or docks that you might need, because when you're traveling, you may need to hook up this device. That is far less convenient than, let me have it be 5 millimeters thicker
and have
a reasonable assortment of ports that I may use infrequently, but at least they're built into the device. So I go in the other direction there. And again, it is like so this laptop that I was just mentioning that I got has 2 USB Type A, 3.2. And that's the thing, nobody ever knows what these USB. It used to be USB 3.0, now it's USB 3.2, Gen 2, right?
Gen 2 something. I'm still on 3.0, so I'm not even paying attention yet. I'm still on Thunderbolt 3.0, USB 3, and I'm
it's got 2 of those, one USB-C that does Thunderbolt 4, and a full-size HDMI on it, and a proprietary power port. And I'm like, I would prefer that it was I actually would prefer it was USB-C power rather than proprietary power, but it needs a gaming laptop and it needs more wattage than a USB-C cable can do. So I get it, but that's a reasonable selection of ports. But like two USB Type-C ports, one of which you're pretty much always using for charging, and then the other one you have hooked up to a dongle or dock when you want to do anything with it. That seems like I'm not a fan of that approach.
Again, like you said, I guess they're assuming what the general consumer is doing, and most, the average person maybe doesn't have things hooked up, but maybe I'm not the average person. I mean, I'm looking at my laptop right now. I have a charging cable, I have the webcam and a USB-A, I have a headphone jack, I have an HDMI plugged in, I have another USB for my hard drive, I have a USB Thunderbolt dongle for my Stream Deck and everything else for the stream. Like, I have so many wires coming out here. I'm like, I could never have that MacBook. It would never work for me.
Yeah, I do. I mean, someone like you, whether it's a university student or someone who works, that tended to be my pattern when I would travel for work, right? I would go to an office somewhere where I had a desk, and then I'd want something portable but reasonably beefy there. And so I was constantly bringing, peripherals and docks and things like that with me. And and whenever I go anywhere with my laptop, it's in my laptop backpack with all this stuff. I suppose there are people who it's like, I'm going down to the Starbucks to work for the afternoon, and I'm just grabbing the laptop and maybe throwing it in a sleeve, and I'm not even bringing the power brick. And I'm not bringing any peripherals because I'm going to be on the internet or writing a document or something. I guess there are those people. I mean, I sound more skeptical of their existence than I actually am. But there are those people, right?
I mean,
I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
And so for me, I don't look so much at the weight or convenience of the laptop itself exclusively. I look at what my bag situation is gonna be, right? And how many different stupid cables and docks I have to have in my bag, and where are they going to go in the bag, and am I going to lose them, and how much does the whole thing weigh?
Yeah. And I think it's funny you say that, because like at least the minimum I'd expect is to bring the charger. I mean, I just had a class right now before the stream, and I had to take my laptop here, and I was thinking, I brought my charger because I was thinking, I went from about 100% to 20% in less than an hour. And I was just doing Word documents, nothing serious. But my laptop does not have the best battery life, so I don't know how you could. Like, I don't really use my laptop as a laptop. It's more of a movable desktop is where I like to call it. It's not really portable. It's more of like a portable setup that I have to set up everything around it to really make it work the best way possible. So, I mean, going back to the iPhone, I feel like, and the MacBooks and that whole idea of, do you want the skinnier device, or like you want to get it 2 millimeters, thinner just to get rid of these, just for design purposes. And I'm thinking, where do we draw the line between utility and design? I think that it's always been a weird line to draw. And I mean, you look at the old iPhones, and it was always like, how thin can we get the the iPhone 5 and the iPhone 6? Like, we're just gonna make it thinner and thinner every year. Like, that was always like the thing everybody was excited for. Like, how much more sleek can it be? And I'm like, I don't know, make it a half an inch thicker and give me like a double the battery life. I much prefer that.
And that's
like, there was always a big argument back then.
And based on the number, I mean, I've always said this. When you look, what are the, still to this day, Anthony? What are the two most commonly purchased, smartphone accessories? Right.
I guess like the charger and the earphones now. I mean, the whole wireless earbud thing I think is blown up. But also, wait, is it not numbers wise? What is it?
Cases.
Surprise me.
Cases, including screen protectors and supplemental battery packs. Right.
See, I never subscribed to the supplemental battery pack thing, so I'm surprised that that's as big of a market as it is.
It's so either supplemental battery packs that attach to the phone, or like the portable charging type solutions, right? And so there's obviously a consumer demand for more resilient devices, and devices with a more time between charges. So I don't know. Anyway, all right. Halo Infinite.
Oh, for sure.
We've got some updates there too, right?
Yeah. So they had a big beta this weekend, actually. Just before, we have a few shooter betas that are happening just now. Battlefield 2042 actually just got announced the beta for next week, which is about like 20 minutes before we went live. So I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was pretty
nice.
That game was actually supposed to drop, I believe, in this week or next week. Got delayed until October, so about a month later it's dropping. But it's interesting because it's kind of having an open beta about a week before the launch, so it's almost one of those betas where it's kind of like almost not even really. I mean, obviously I'm sure they're testing it the last day of launch, but it seems like it's almost complete kind of. And they just released a full gameplay trailer for it, which is pretty exciting. But again, moving on to Halo, which just finished this week. They had a big team battle beta, which is a larger map game mode for Halo. If you're a big fan of Halo in the past, the map they showed was a capture the flag big team battle map that looked a lot like classic Halo's Blood Gulch and stuff like that. So it was very interesting. I'm not sure if I can pull up any gameplay here, but I can pull this up here and maybe let this play in the background if that's all right. But it was actually really exciting to see this gameplay, and not a lot of new news other than just development updates. But I'm really excited for Halo. As someone Halo was kind of the game that got me into gaming in general. I mean, I remember, my first Xbox game really was Halo, and it kind of changed everything for me. So looking back at this, and definitely a lot of nostalgia for sure, but I'm just kind of not pessimistic, but skeptical with Halo Infinite. I mean, we've seen all the delays that have happened. It was supposed to be a launch game for the Xbox Series, and obviously that didn't happen. It was almost delayed again a few times this year. It was delayed, I believe, to this. It was supposed to be this spring. Now it's this fall. And I'm just really hoping that it all comes together because this gameplay looked awesome. I mean, if you're seeing it down the screen, if you're watching home, it's maybe a little hard to see, but the gameplay is very smooth. There's a grappling hook now. It's a lot more fluid. Seems like
I honestly thought it looked pretty good. They were delayed, but I even thought it looked pretty good the first time they released footage from it.
And I know they got a lot of hate the first time they showed the single player. There were a lot of people weren't happy with the graphics online and stuff like that. I thought it looked great. I mean, it's Halo.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting. I mean, I was expecting that art style. Knowing the way 343 has been handling Halo in the past few years. Since Bungie left the franchise and moved on to Destiny and all that. I'm not. Obviously, I'm probably more inclined to be nostalgic and be a fan of the old Bungie games. But that being said, I think 343 is always focused on smoother gameplay. I mean, you saw with Halo 4 and 5, they sped up Halo a bit. They added sprint, they added aim, like aiming down sights. They added things that were never part of Halo and kind of not to just make it more mainstream, but I think it kind of modernized it a little bit. And so
and that was, I mean, if there was a time. If there was a time for, and there was, but if there was a time for controversy in the player base, that was the time.
That was
right?
it. Again, they were switching studios. That was the time to do it for sure.
And people certainly did, have a lot to say about that. Not unreasonably so. But yeah, I mean, my reaction to having seen the Halo Infinite footage is I don't find the graphics are blowing me away. They feel very rooted in the classic Halo style, which people like. I mean, that's you're attracted to the franchise and you like it because you like it, and why would you mess with that? So I get it. It doesn't feel envelope pushing to me in any way, though.
I'd have to agree. I mean, obviously, this was originally an Xbox One title. Was gonna, I believe it's still launching on both Xbox One and Xbox Series X. As are pretty much every Xbox game that's coming out right now because of their system. But I mean, with that in mind, I think it was, development started with the Xbox One in mind, at least under the impression that I've gotten, seeing how it's been in development for a few years now. Obviously, they had last year when the delay happened, they had a change in the management. I know Joseph Staten, who you actually used to work for Bungie, came on as project leads. They did switch project leads mid-development and probably well into development, given that was basically right before the Xbox Series' launch. So I'm hoping that didn't shake things up too much. I'm hoping that maybe that put them in a new direction. And it seems like they've been in a really good new direction since that happened. Every showcase and every preview like this they've shown has been, has looked good. Again, like you said, it's not jaw-dropping to me. It's not maybe not giving me that same, oh my goodness, look at these graphics feeling that I'm getting with some of these new next-gen trailers. But that being said, it's Halo. I'm not playing for the graphics. I mean, that would be a bonus. I mean, it doesn't look terrible by any means. It looks very good.
Sure, of course, yeah.
I'm looking for that Halo gameplay. I'm looking for how is it going to feel, how is it going to play, and I'm generally excited about it. I mean, obviously, I'll be playing probably on my laptop here. I don't have a Series X at the moment, but something I'm very excited for. And as much as like I said in the past, I'm more a PlayStation guy these days. That Halo is a game that I will definitely download and go back for sure. So I'm excited to see how that turns out. Again, it's launching in November, so we'll see how that goes. Again, kind of a crowded shooter space this fall. Like we were saying earlier, it's like we have a lot of remakes, and then we kind of have like Call of Duty, Battlefield, Halo, and then everything that's first party kind of got delayed. Unfortunately, we just have some Nintendo fare as we talked about earlier, but it's an interesting fall. A lot of shooters, kind of a nostalgic fall for sure, at least for me.
It was funny. I took a hiatus from gaming for a while when I was in high school and college, and then I got back into it, and I picked up an original Xbox, and I think Halo for original Halo for original Xbox was the first game I picked up after a long hiatus, and I was pretty impressed. And it's it is a vaunted franchise, but that's 20 years ago now. So
yeah. And it's a shame that they weren't, able to re-release it with the console, because they made a big deal about, the 20th anniversary, and it was going to be, a new console launching with Halo once again, and obviously that all fell through. It's upsetting, but hopefully at this time they could stick the landing. And obviously with COVID and everything else going on, and no one's a stranger to delays these days. We talked about that over and over in the past. So I'm again hoping for the best for sure. But
indeed.
Keeping on Xbox news, we did see that Xbox is getting a new Edge browser that could play Stadia games and access
Yeah,
to
so this
Discord
is
and
this
other
is
things?
I found
This
this
is
story and I thought it
interesting.
was kind of quirky and interesting, especially because I have an interest in where cloud gaming tech is going for professional reasons. But so so as you said, Xbox is in the process. I think it may only be out now for like beta channel users or something. But Xbox is rolling out an update to the stock browser to be the part of the same Edge Chromium based lineage that it is now the main Edge lineage on Windows. Among the things that this adds, is robust mouse and keyboard support while browsing. And interestingly enough, the ability to use the browser to connect to at least some cloud gaming services that aren't Microsoft's cloud gaming service. So as you said, folks who have gotten the update are playing Stadia games in the browser on Xbox or playing Steam games using Parsec's browser in browser version on Xbox. And again, I find the whole cloud gaming thing, interesting. I think this perpetual, how much gaming power is going to be in your local computing device, how much gaming power is going to be in the cloud, which Xbox was already doing with Microsoft's streaming service. And now, there's sort of a hack out there to get third-party streaming services on there. So we'll see if that goes unpatched. We'll see if it actually is something that Xbox wants to discourage, or maybe it's something that they want to encourage. We don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting. I think we talked about this a bit with the Steam Deck announcement a few weeks back about, and again, tying this back into the laptops and just other ideas of, what do we need to carry around on a regular basis? If cloud gaming gets to the point where we are, being able to stream, full server level hardware type, experiences on a portable device that doesn't really have that hardware necessarily, like that could change everything. So I mean, we talk about like, obviously bringing back to the Steam Deck idea of how, this interface is basically unlocked to allow any kind of content to come in. So obviously that unlocks the potential for any other streaming service, Xbox Game Pass, anything like that. Obviously you wouldn't need to do it through that, but like Stadia, as you can see right here, I'm showing the video here, someone's pulling up Stadia, they're playing Destiny on Stadia through an Xbox, which is kind of crazy. But like we said with the Steam Deck, like if you're able to just play whatever you want through a platform and kind of, have a workaround for that, it kind of unlocks like, video games to evolve in a new way where we could see just like different types of experiences being made if knowing that this will get, and just being able to play, like just when the Switch launched, being able to play Skyrim in your pocket, like that was such a big deal when the Switch launched. And now seeing how streaming is coming to this level where we're going to be able to get like real high level performance type experiences on the go or on a TV or through a web browser or something that simple is exciting for sure. I'm curious to see how that's going to pan out. I mean, obviously right now nothing's perfect. Stadia and Game Pass are not perfect. They're very interesting experiences, but streaming definitely has a way to go, and internet in general for everyone has a way to go. But it could definitely be. I think it might be the future of online and portable gaming. But who's to say?
It's going to happen eventually. It's just a question of when does the technology really get there to enable it. These streaming services work remarkably well, and I did a little bit of research into this professionally. If you can get 30 megabits of bandwidth and 30 millisecond ish ping time to where the cloud gaming server is, that's pretty good. I would not want to be playing a competitive esports title that way, but to absolutely to play an adventure driven single player game experience, even a graphically rich one, that's pretty good. I'm playing Cyberpunk streamed from something that is able to do ray trace lighting at really, really high settings. And that's kind of superior to my, local, GTX 1070 based setup that can't, right? That's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that just the idea of that portability, like I said before, I mean, I feel like there's so many opportunities. I mean, like you said, like just having a virtual machine to do anything, whether it's gaming or not, I just feel like the way we could use that technology in other, in other industries even too, is just really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
For sure. But maybe switching gears a little bit, something we've talked about in the past, actually, the Apple and Epic lawsuit that we covered previously has some new developments. If we like to go over that. So as we've seen now, Apple has actually banned Fortnite from the App Store completely until all these appeals are exhausted and the lawsuit's basically settled, which I found very interesting. I'm not sure if you want to have any comments on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so they were banned, right? They were banned, going back prior to when Epic filed their lawsuit against Apple. Apple banned them for violating, their Epic violating their developer agreement with Apple, which they in fact did. And that was not one of the outcomes that was reversed by the lawsuit. That part of it was upheld. So Apple has the right to continue to exclude Epic. And that's what they're saying they're going to do. I mean, it's my read on it, Anthony, since you asked, is it's probably negotiating tactics.
Yeah.
Apple,
that's what seems to me.
Apple isn't required to let them back in. So, and there are still matters at issue, and Apple would prefer not to have Epic, appeal things or get a different finding on appeal. If they do, that's less favorable to Apple. So, Apple in particular, but really both parties have an incentive to try to get something negotiated. And so why would you give away being back on the store for free, continue to, to hold that over them, and maybe you can negotiate something.
I agree. I feel like it's obviously a temporary thing. I feel like someone at Apple probably does want Fortnite on the App Store. Obviously, whatever cut they're getting, it certainly is some significant amount of revenue when it is, whatever cut, whether it's at 30% or something, something else they work out, it certainly is a significant amount of revenue. I mean, it's probably the biggest. I mean, I'm not sure about mobile gaming market, but it's probably one of the biggest games, monetarily.
Yeah, it's
in the world.
I mean, Apple is there's no question Apple is leaving a lot of money on the table by not doing it. And I really think they want to preserve the principle of controlling that ecosystem, and they're willing to leave a lot of money on the table to make that happen because they think it's going to pay off in the long term. Again, this lawsuit, as the articles about this say, this lawsuit could go on for years, like 5 years, until it actually is definitively resolved. And even then, Apple may not be required to reinstate them. And again, their position is we're not even going to entertain doing that while it's really pending. Again, my guess is it doesn't go 5 years. My guess is it goes significantly less than that, because both parties have somewhat of an incentive to negotiate. And it would probably be better for consumers if they did.
I think so. And I guess it's interesting that, it's talking about Apple again. Obviously we talked about, their product line earlier, but just thinking about where they're going forward, I'm curious to see what their interest is in the gaming space. Is it just to kind of be an environment where they're, taking, having this App Store environment, having this game, ecosystem, or do they want to jump more into this? I mean, obviously, like we talked about the 120 hertz screen, they always advertise, improving mobile gaming. And I'm curious to see, how, where they're investing in the mobile gaming market going forward, and maybe what's their outlook, even when it comes to cloud streaming. And, we've seen Xbox Game Pass just arrived on iPhone relatively recently this year. It was only on Android before. So I'm curious to see like what's their actual game plan in terms of getting into this market, because I feel like they have to have something,
Yeah, I think they're in it for the long haul. I don't have any inside knowledge here. We do. I mean, that's not true. I have some inside knowledge. We as a company, we have a relationship. Eline does have a relationship with Apple. So there are, there are certain things we're under non-disclosure about that I can't speak to. What I can say is, I believe, and again, here this is not any inside baseball. I believe they're serious, and I understand why. I think if you look at Apple's history, there are some very, very smart folks who work at Apple, and they're a big company, and they desire to have a diversity of revenue streams, and I think if you go back and you look at the history of the iPod, and it's a hardware device, and they made a ton of money becoming a distributor of content for that device. And it completely changed the way we all consume music, right? I think when the iPhone came out as hardware and did not originally support apps, Steve Jobs famously saying it doesn't need to support apps. Who would want that, right?
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, a couple iterations later, there's the App Store. And now apps are the dominant thing on mobile, and it's a recurring services revenue stream for Apple. Yeah. And they've got their TV Plus service, and they've got Apple Arcade. I have zero inside knowledge here, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they were looking at streaming as a potential, solution for stuff and a play in the space, again, as a recurring services revenue stream. So I think they want to do that. And I suspect there is an element of Apple. I think a lot of people frame this as, well, Apple has the hardware and they have the storefront distribution platform for the hardware that they want to control, and they're fighting back against Epic for that and preventing Epic from, trying to encroach on their territory. And there's certainly truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more going on here, and Apple sees themselves down the road as more directly competitive or potentially directly competitive with Epic as a content provider, as a services, platform for game developers, right? A monetization and services platform, potentially as an IP player, even again, Apple TV, not so much Apple Arcade where the IP is controlled by the individual developers, but Apple TV Plus, where they curate content and they have they have the #1 Emmy-winning comedy show.
I love Ted Lasso. I'm not anti-Apple here. I love what they're doing. It's just
that is IP that that is their exclusive IP for their distribution platform, and they've got a lot of other content like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did more of that in gaming.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like you said, it's just like one piece of the puzzle. Like you're bringing up Apple TV, everything, their product line, everything else they do. It's like they have a very at least impressive track record and strategy when it comes to branching out into all these different avenues. I mean, just going back to the iPhone 13 that we didn't even mention was the new camera system, how they're basically, they introduced, which I think it's actually not in the iPhone yet. They kind of, fibbed a little bit. It's coming out in a software update later, but they introduced ProRes video and this new camera system, and having basically a digital camera focus rack system based on AI imagery, which is very, as a film person, that was very cool to see for me. But I'm thinking maybe I would use that a few times and I would say, this is not as good as I'd like it to look. I'm not sure how great that actually worked, but for someone who's an aspiring filmmaker to be able to just go on their iPhone, and there have been films shot in the past on iPhone that have actually came out really well. I mean, Sean Baker, big filmmaker, who's done that in the past, but
it's really hard to. People often. There's some truth to this, and where people say, "Oh, it's this thing is over $1,000 for a phone," and it's like, well, not really, because yes, it is that expensive, and yes, it is a phone, but it's also a supercomputer,
literally in your hand,
the best still and movie camera you can fit in your pocket.
100%. It's relatively cheap for like a movie, like a camera just to film on. It's like a budget camera basically. It's like, I mean, I've shot films. I've been lucky to be able to shoot films through the school and stuff, and the cameras that they have. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions, like in some cases millions of dollars. Like, it's crazy how expensive like an actual film shoot could be. So to be able to have a little tripod attachment for like $10 on your iPhone and be able to shoot a pretty compelling that's huge.
And again, if you can have some control over your lighting and some control over stabilization, whether it's with a tripod or with a portable Steadicam rig or whatever, and you can get 90% as good as the $100,000
It's still,
camera.
still something.
People constantly underestimate that effect, right? It's like right now, right? We're on, we're recording a podcast style, thing here. It's it's somewhat informal, but I'm using a decent microphone, but with a relatively cheap audio interface. The natural lighting in here is okay today. I could have set up some studio lighting, and that would vastly improve it. But guess what my webcam is, Anthony?
What is it?
It's an old iPhone with a cracked screen.
There you go.
Right.
And it looks
because
great.
you can't beat that. You can't, you just can't. When it's effectively free because you have it sitting around, it's better than a video conferencing style webcam. You could spend $700 on a mirrorless camera that would give you similar performance, and a bigger sensor, or you use the iPhone with a smaller sensor but really good AI, and it's pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I mean, my webcam is actually broken on my laptop, so I'm using like a portable, like $30 Amazon webcam, because every other webcam is hundreds and hundreds of dollars. You want to buy like its own portable setup, and obviously, maybe I'm thinking maybe in the future using a mobile device, maybe that would even be better. But it's just one of those things where I feel people take it for granted sometimes. I mean, like you said, people say it's $1,000 though. Who's spending that? And I'm thinking, well, is the average person going and buying a $1,100 unlocked iPhone, or are they paying a payment plan? Where I feel like most people are on some sort of, whether it's whatever network you're on, it's part of your monthly bill. And I feel like it's not, I wouldn't want to assume that everyone has an iPhone these days. I mean, I don't, but I'm saying most people have some sort of portable device now, and there are so many affordable, like if you're not looking for the latest and greatest, last year's devices, 5 years ago's devices that you can get for really cheap and have a great camera right in your pocket from the get-go. And it's something that goes unnoticed for sure.
Yeah, I think people do underestimate it, and it. Again, people are also just used to it, by now, and sometimes you got to step back and take that perspective, because it's like I'm old enough to remember when there were no smartphones, right? I'm old enough to remember when there were no cell phones, or like cell phones were like a thing that like rich people and doctors had, And I'm also old enough to remember when there were crappy smartphones, right?
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember when the BlackBerry was a game changer, because you could actually productively do email remotely because it had a decent keyboard on it, right?
Yeah. I remember my dad had a BlackBerry, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's a full keyboard and it was like such a indescribable thing to me. I remember seeing all these different improvements.
Just being able to go from a workflow where it's like, oh, I got to be at a desk to respond to an email, and people are calling me and things like that, what they need to get a hold of me, versus anybody can send me an email anytime and I can respond. That was game changing, And now people are like, whatever. Oh, I got all this email. Stop emailing me.
Yeah. And I think it's funny, like maybe I think we're running out of time here, but just to close things out, like that whole idea of, what we take for granted. And we're talking about, cloud gaming and other things in the future, like talking about it, like, oh, when is this going to speed up? When do we get to this point? Meanwhile, like, only a few years ago, this was not even close to possible in a lot of ways.
Right.
A lot of things we talk about. So I think it's funny, even like I have an older brother who's about 6 years older than me, and a younger sister who's about like 17 now. So it's funny how I feel like I'm right in the middle of this whole like technological. I was born in 2000, so right on the turn of the century, and it's like if you go 5 years forward or 5 years back, they're like completely different generations. Like I don't feel like we're all Gen Z. Like no, I feel like I'm not even the same generation as either my older brother or my younger sister, just because of the differences. Like when the iPhone came out, I was 2007. I was 7 years old, so I at least had like a childhood where I wasn't. I don't know, on an iPad or some sort of device at all times. I played with G.I. Joes, and I had like I went outside. Like I feel like now, like things are you flip from like every like 2-year-old baby has an iPad, from the get go, and it's like I feel like we're changing like so exponentially that it's crazy.
So we'll leave you with this parting thought on that, which is I'm paraphrasing it. It's a quote from Douglas Adams, who's the author of the Hitchhiker's Guide, series, and he was a big technology geek. And he has a quote in the end. It is to the effect of, any technology that's around before you're 18 is boring and has just always been there. And it's like for your old man, you know? And then any technology that comes out between like when you're like 18 and 50 is super cool. It's the most amazing, greatest thing. It will change the world, and you got to have it. And then any technology that comes out when you're 50 or older is like a violation of the natural order of things and unnecessary.
Exactly.
And that kind of is it. I'll tell you one of the quick real. I didn't realize you had that generational gap in your family. I have a similar. I have a brother who's 13 years younger than me. And I'll, you know, just to date myself and him a little bit, he calls me up one day when he's in high school, and he's like super concerned. And he's like, dude, when you were in high school, there were no cell phones, right? And I was like, that's right. And he's like, but how did you like make plans with people? And I was like, well, earlier that day, we would, you know, sometimes in person or sometimes by calling the one phone line that people's parents had at their house, we would arrange to meet up at a specific time somewhere to do something, such as we'll all go see this movie showing at 8 p.m. at this theater. And then he got like super concerned. He was like, but dude, like what would you do if, like, what would happen if somebody, you know, something came up and like somebody couldn't make it at that time, or it got complicated, whatever. And I was like, that's their problem, man. We waited 5 minutes and then we were like, sorry, dude. And he just couldn't, you know, he couldn't relate to it. And it's people just take it for granted. And you know, and obviously it's, you know, I don't know what I would do with that. I wouldn't like to go back to a days where, you know, I didn't have a cell phone, especially with being a parent now, but it's, you know, it is what it is, and you get it. But that's well, that's kind of a happy technological note to leave things on for this week. So have a good rest of your week at school, Anthony. You know, if you we'll see if you can get one of these going next week while I'm away. I'll be out of as I said, I'll be out of the country on business, but maybe one of our other members or our Rogues Gallery can join you for a session.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be great. And if not, hopefully we'll see you guys when we see you. But thank you so much, as always, for joining. It's always a pleasure. And that's about it for The Endless Report, episode 6. Thank you so much again, Brian. And have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.